She was just the janitor's daughter, invisible amidst the sparkle of jewels and the practiced smiles of the powerful. That gala night, when she stepped where she shouldn't have, 2 security guards grabbed her. Everyone expected her to be kicked out in shame. But then the billionaire descended the grand staircase, took the notebook from her hands, and the entire ballroom fell silent. What he saw on those crumpled pages would change not only the life of that girl, but the meaning of that party forever. The Metropolitan Opera House in New York had never looked so gilded. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like tamed constellations, each light reflecting off the Baroque mirrors that lined the walls. The air smelled of French perfume, Italian leather, and promises wrapped in rehearsed speeches. It was the night of the Alvarenga Institute's charity ball, the most anticipated event of the year among the New York elite. Politicians, business titans, digital influencers, and celebrities paraded through the marble halls as if luxury were a language only they spoke fluently. At the center of the ballroom, raised on a lit platform, Enrique Alvarenga smiled with the poise of someone who knew the perfect angle for every camera. His graying hair was slicked back with surgical precision. His custom-tailored navy suit cost more than a new car. He held a champagne flute like a trophy, not because the drink mattered, but because the gesture completed the picture. At 52, Enrique had built an empire in the financial sector and in recent years had decided to polish his image with the veneer of philanthropy. The Alvarenga Institute was his masterpiece of moral marketing. Educational projects, digital inclusion campaigns, partnerships with NGOs, all packaged in heartwarming videos and posts with inspiring hashtags. But far from the spotlights, in the service corridors that ran through the theater's guts was the other side of the same coin. Women in grey uniforms pushed carts laden with cleaning supplies, brooms and mops. Their tired faces didn't appear in the official photos. Their names weren't on the guest list. Among them, silent and efficient as always, was Joanna. Joanna was 41. Her dark skin marked by the sun and double shifts, her hands rough from knowing every kind of dirt that money could produce. For over a decade, she had cleaned the offices of the Alvarenga Institute. She knew every corner of that glass-fronted building in the financial district. She knew where the executives hid their whiskey glasses before morning meetings. She knew which restroom had the leaky faucet. She knew that the human value speeches ended at the break room door. Joanna never complained, not because she agreed, but because she knew complaining was a luxury she couldn't afford. She had a daughter to raise, and it was for her that she woke up at 5 in the morning every day. Aline waited for her mother backstage at the theater, hidden behind a red velvet curtain that smelled of dust and history. She was 13, with large, observant eyes and curly hair pulled back in an impromptu bun. She wore a faded cotton t-shirt, jeans patched at the knee, and a pair of sneakers that had long since lost their original color. In her hands, she clutched her most prized possession, a notebook covered in clear packing tape, its yellowed pages filled with drawings, diagrams, and notes in tiny, hurried handwriting. Aline wasn't there by accident. Whenever her mother had a night shift at events like this, she accompanied her. Officially, she stayed waiting in the service area. In practice, she observed. She observed everything, the gestures, the voices, the automatic smiles. She watched how power moved in that ballroom, light, invisible, but as relentless as gravity. And as she observed, she scribbled ideas in her notebook, because Aline had a project, a dream that no one except herself took seriously. She was creating an app, all by herself, using an old smartphone her mother had bought on a Black Friday sale, using free YouTube tutorials watched on the neighborhood park's Wi-Fi, using the stubbornness of someone born without shortcuts who learned to build bridges with her own hands. The app's name was written on the first page of the notebook in big, firm letters, words that fit. The idea was simple and revolutionary. Aline wanted to create a platform that translated academic texts, scientific articles, and technical books into accessible language, not shallow summaries, not simplifications that stripped away meaning, but a real bridge between formal knowledge and people who didn't have the time, money, or education to access it. People like her mother. People like herself. That night, as the orchestra played Vivaldi and the guests toasted to the education they had never needed to fight for, Aline watched through the gaps in the curtain. She saw the long gowns, the stiletto heels, the jewelry that sparkled brighter than the stars outside. And she thought, do any of them know what it's like to study by streetlight because the power bill was cut? The clock struck midnight when the distraction happened. The orchestra shifted its tone, a dramatic crescendo that made the ballroom vibrate. Aline, mesmerized by the music, took a step forward, then another and another. Without realizing it, she crossed the invisible line that separated her world from theirs. She stepped onto the red carpet. The ballroom lights enveloped her like a cruel spotlight, and that's when she realized dozens of eyes were fixed on her. 2 security guards advanced immediately, with the mechanical efficiency of those trained to maintain order. They were large men, in black suits and earpieces, their faces expressionless. One of them grabbed Aline's arm firmly, but not violently. The other blocked her path back. "Hey, kid," the first one said, his voice low but hard. "This isn't a place for you. Go back to the staff area." Aline tried to explain. Her voice came out trembling, almost inaudible amidst the music and conversations. "I'm just waiting for my mum. She works here. I didn't..." But no one was listening. Some guests chuckled softly, embarrassed. Others looked away, pretending not to see. A woman in a blue dress whispered something in her husband's ear, who shook his head in disapproval. "How did they let this child in?" The guard was already starting to pull Aline back when a voice cut through the ballroom like a sharp blade. "Stop!" The sound came from the top of the grand staircase. Enrique Alvarenga stood there, microphone still in hand, his eyes fixed on the scene unfolding in the middle of the ballroom. Silence spread like a wave. The orchestra stopped playing. The chatter died in the air. Even the servers froze, trays suspended. Enrique descended the steps slowly, each footfall echoing on the marble. His eyes never left Aline. The security guards, flustered, released the girl's arm and backed away. She stood there, alone in the spotlight, clutching her notebook to her chest like a shield. Enrique stopped before her. He observed her from head to toe, not with disdain, but with a genuine curiosity no one expected. Then he raised the microphone and spoke, his voice firm and clear. "Do you know who she is?" The audience waited, breathless. "This is the daughter of the woman who cleans the floors where you dance." Enrique paused, letting the sentence hang in the air. "And ironically, she's the only person here who truly understands what it means to transform something dirty into something beautiful." A ripple went through the hall, like an uncontrolled electrical current. Some guests frowned, others exchanged bewildered glances. There was confusion in the air, confusion mixed with curiosity, indignation masked as interest. Enrique Alvarenga, the man orchestrating the evening like a conductor leads a symphony, had just done something completely off script. And everyone knew that when Enrique went off script, something significant was about to happen. Aline remained motionless, her eyes wide, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Her hands gripped the notebook against her chest so tightly her fingers turned white. She didn't understand what was happening. She didn't understand why this man, this billionaire she only knew from magazine photos, was standing there in front of her, talking about her mother as if he knew her. Enrique extended his hand, slowly and deliberately, pointing to the notebook. "May I see it?" he asked, his voice soft but carrying an authority that brooked no refusal. Aline hesitated. That notebook was her entire world. It was where impossible dreams took shape, where absurd ideas became concrete diagrams, where she, the invisible girl, transformed into a creator, an architect, an engineer of possible futures. Handing it over felt like giving away a piece of herself. But something in Henrique's eyes, a genuine curiosity, an attention she'd never felt from an adult in this world, made her yield. With trembling hands, she extended the notebook. Henrique took it carefully, as if holding something sacred. He opened the first page, then the second. His eyes scanned the lines, the drawings, the diagrams. The expression on his face shifted. The mask of the polished host gave way to something deeper. Surprise, recognition, perhaps even respect. The pages were filled with sketches of app interfaces, hand-drawn with a ruler and a blue ballpoint pen. There were mock-ups of user flows, navigation paths, notes on text simplification algorithms, usability studies. On one page, Aline had pasted a newspaper clipping about functional illiteracy in Brazil. On another, there was a list of difficult words and their translations into simple language. And in the center of the notebook, in large, firm letters, written in red pen, was the project's mission. Educate those who don't have time to study. Henrique turned a few more pages. He found a business model sketch. Aline had thought of everything, from monetization through university partnerships to free distribution to public schools. There was even a study on accessibility for the visually impaired, with notes on screen readers and audio navigation. He closed the notebook slowly and looked up at Aline. For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then, with a sudden movement, he turned to the audience and held the notebook above his head, as if it were a trophy. "This notebook," he said, his voice echoing through the hall with a force that silenced everyone completely, "is worth more than all the invitations tonight." The silence that followed was so dense it felt physical. No one moved. No one dared to breathe too loudly. "You came here to celebrate education," Henrique continued, walking slowly through the hall, still holding the notebook. "You donated money, posed for photos, toasted inclusion, but how many of you have actually thought about how education reaches those who need it most? How many of you have wondered why millions of Americans can't finish a book, not because they're incapable, but because the language was designed to exclude them?" He stopped in the center of the hall, under the largest chandelier, and pointed to Aline. "This girl," he said, his voice now lower but no less intense, "created something none of us, with our privileges, our degrees, our connections, ever thought to do. She identified a real problem. She designed a concrete solution. And she did it alone, with an old phone and the Wi-Fi from a public park." The cameras, which until then had been focused on dresses and jewelry, now turned to Aline. Flashes began to pop. She blinked, blinded, raising a hand to shield her eyes. She felt her face burn, her heart race, her legs tremble. She wanted to disappear. She wanted the earth to open up and swallow her. But Henrique didn't stop. "Do you know the difference between philanthropy and justice?" he asked, now addressing the cameras directly. "Philanthropy is giving what's left over. Justice is recognizing who should have been here from the start." He walked back to Aline and returned the notebook with care, placing it in her hands as if it were a sacred contract. "Aline," he said, and it was the first time anyone that night had called her by name, "the Alvarenga Institute will fund your project. We will make words that fit a reality, and you will receive a full scholarship from high school through the university of your choice." The hall erupted. Some applauded, others stood in shock, still others seemed incredulous. But the reaction no longer mattered, because something had irrevocably changed that night. The script had been torn up, the invisible hierarchy had been exposed to the light. And at the back of the hall, hidden behind a marble column, Joanna watched it all with her hands over her mouth, her eyes welling up, her whole body trembling. She had spent 13 years cleaning these floors, hearing these voices, serving these people. 13 years invisible, 13 years treated like part of the furniture, and now her daughter, her girl, was there, at the center of it all, being seen, being heard, being recognized. Joanna couldn't hold back her tears. And for the first time in a long time, they weren't tears of exhaustion. They were tears of something she had almost forgotten the name of: hope. The next 3 months after the gala were a whirlwind. Henrique Alvarenga fulfilled his promise with the methodical efficiency of someone accustomed to turning ideas into empires. Aline was enrolled in an elite private school, received a brand new laptop, and was introduced to a team of developers who would work with her on the app. Her story became headline news. 13-year-old girl creates educational inclusion app discovered at gala ball. Magazines, TV shows, podcasts, everyone wanted to hear the story of the janitor's daughter who impressed a billionaire. But what those slickly produced articles didn't tell was the weight that came with the recognition. Aline wasn't prepared for it. She wasn't prepared to wake up at 5:30 in the morning to take 2 buses to her new school, where classmates wore imported sneakers and talked about international trips like they were grocery runs. She wasn't prepared for the weekly meetings at the institute, where middle-aged men in designer glasses debated positioning strategies and social impact narratives, while she struggled to grasp what any of those words truly meant. And most importantly, she wasn't prepared to realize that her project, that idea born from sleepless nights, fueled by free tutorials and sheer stubbornness, was slowly being twisted into something else. In the early meetings, Aline still had a voice. The developers listened to her ideas, asked questions, took note of her suggestions. But as the weeks went by, something shifted. Decisions started being made without her. The design she had envisioned, simple, direct, functional, was replaced with something more modern, more marketable. The language she wanted to use, accessible yet respectful, was deemed too basic and rewritten by marketing folks. In one meeting, a digital marketing executive said with a smile, "Aline, you had the brilliant idea, and we're going to honor that. But now we need to let the professionals do their job, okay?" She didn't reply. She just nodded, because she hadn't yet learned that sometimes education also teaches you to stay quiet. At school, things weren't any easier. On the first day, the principal introduced her to the class as the girl from the gala, and the looks Aline received weren't of admiration. They were of curiosity mixed with discomfort. She was a social experiment, a well-intentioned intruder. The girls in her class had invisible codes Aline didn't know, specific brand names, references to shows she'd never watched, slang that seemed to change weekly. She tried to keep up, but it was like trying to dance to a song whose beat she couldn't hear. There was an incident 3 weeks into the school year. During lunch, Aline was sitting alone in the courtyard, staring at her notebook, now just a nostalgic object, as the real project was happening miles away from her. 3 girls approached. One of them, Beatrice, daughter of an agribusiness tycoon, asked in a voice too saccharine to be sincere, "Is it true your mum is a janitor?" Aline looked up. "Yes." "That's so cool," Beatrice said, exchanging glances with her friends. "Like super inspiring, really. But don't you think it's kind of weird, like being here, you know? Because tuition at this school is ridiculously expensive. Is it fair that you don't pay, and we do?" The others chuckled softly. Aline felt her face burn. She wanted to retort, wanted to say she hadn't asked to be here, hadn't asked to be turned into a symbol, that she just wanted to create something that would help people like her mother. But the words wouldn't come. She just closed her notebook and walked away. That night at home, Joanna noticed something was wrong. Aline barely touched her dinner. She sat quietly, staring at her phone without really seeing anything. Joanna pulled up a chair and sat beside her daughter. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice gentle. "Nothing, Mom." "Aline." The girl sighed deeply. "Mom, I don't know if I want to continue. At school, with the project, with all of this." Joanna frowned. "What do you mean?" "But this is the chance of a lifetime, honey. It's everything you've always wanted." "It's not, Mom." Aline's voice was so low Joanna had to lean in to hear. I wanted to make the app. I wanted to help. But now they've taken my idea and made it into something else. And I don't even know if I'm part of it anymore. Joanna was silent for a long time. Then she took her daughter's hand and said, You know what I've learned cleaning the floors in these places all these years? They'll always try to make you feel small, because when you feel small, you don't fight. You just say thank you. She squeezed Aline's hand tightly. But you're not small, honey. And this idea is yours. So don't let them steal it. Don't let them steal you either. Aline looked at her mother, her eyes welling up. But how, Mom? They're so big. Joanna smiled. Only big until you stop looking up at them. The app launch meeting was scheduled for Friday, 10 in the morning, in the main auditorium of the Alvarenga Institute. It was meant to be a press event. Journalists, digital influencers, institutional partners, all invited to witness the official launch of Words That Fit, or rather, what was left of it. Aline arrived early, accompanied by her mother. Joanna had managed to get time off work, a rare occurrence, but she insisted she wouldn't miss this for anything. They sat in the back rows of the auditorium, while the important guests occupied the front seats. Aline held her original notebook on her lap, her fingers tracing the yellowed pages like someone searching for courage in old memories. The presentation began. One of the Institute's executives took the stage and launched into an enthusiastic speech about social innovation, inclusive technology, and empowerment through education. Colorful slides showed impact graphs, user projections, strategic partnerships, all very polished, all very professional. Then he called Aline to the stage. And now let's hear from the brilliant mind behind this revolutionary project, he said, smiling at the cameras. Aline, come on up. She walked onto the stage slowly, her legs heavy, her heart pounding. She took the microphone. Everyone waited. The cameras focused on her. The silence was expectant, almost ceremonial. Aline took a deep breath. Thank you, she began, her voice still timid. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your support. But, she paused. She looked at the executive beside her, then at Enrique Alvarenga, seated in the front row. But I need to be honest with you. The executive frowned. Enrique leaned forward, attentive. When I created Words That Fit, Aline continued, her voice growing stronger, I had a very clear idea. I wish people like my mum, who worked 12-hour days and never got the chance to finish school, could access knowledge in a simple, genuine way, not watered down. Not so simplified it loses its meaning, but translated, with respect. She looked out at the audience. But the app you're launching today isn't that. It's not what I created. You've turned it into a marketing tool, packed it with ads, put paywalls on the best features, and you've stripped away the most important thing, the dignity of the people who use it. A murmur swept through the auditorium. The executive tried to interject, but Aline raised her hand, signaling for quiet. And surprisingly, he obeyed. I'm just a 13-year-old girl, she said, her voice trembling but firm. I don't know marketing, I don't know business strategy, but I know what it's like to need something. I know what it's like to not have money for classes. I know what it's like to feel ashamed because you don't understand a word everyone else seems to know. She looked directly at Enrique. If this project isn't for the people who truly need it, then it's for nothing. The silence that followed was absolute. The cameras kept rolling, but no one knew what to do. The executive was flushed red, trying to decide if he should snatch the microphone back. But then Enrique stood up. He walked onto the stage with slow, steady steps. He stopped beside Aline and looked at her with an expression no one could decipher. Then he took the microphone from her hand and said, "She's right." The auditorium erupted in whispers. Journalists exchanged confused glances. Institute executives exchanged alarmed looks. Enrique Alvarenga, the man who had built an empire on control and strategy, had just thrown the script out the window. Again. He walked over to the screen where the app's slides were still projected and pointed at it. "You see this?" he asked, his voice calm but sharp. "Pretty graphics, optimistic projections, strategic partnerships. But you know what's not here? The girl who came up with the idea. Her voice, the soul of the project." He turned to the executive leading the presentation. "Paulo, you're excellent at what you do, but this time we messed up. I messed up. We took a 13-year-old's vision and tried to force it into our systems, and in the process, we lost exactly what made this idea special." Paulo tried to respond, but Enrique cut him off with a firm gesture. "No, I want you to listen. All of us need to listen." He gestured to Aline, who was still on stage, eyes wide, not believing what was happening. She didn't come to us asking for money. She came with a solution. And we, instead of amplifying her solution, tried to sell it. We turned social impact into a product. And that, Enrique paused, his voice lowering, that isn't philanthropy, it's colonization. The word landed like a bomb. Some guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others nodded slowly, as if an uncomfortable truth had finally been spoken aloud. Enrique turned back to Aline. "I'm sorry. I promised I'd support you, but what I did was push you into a system that wasn't designed to truly hear you." He extended his hand. "So here's my new proposal. We start over from scratch. But this time, you're in charge. You decide what goes in, what comes out, how it works. And we're just here to execute what you design." Aline looked at the outstretched hand. Then she looked at her mother in the back of the auditorium. Joanna had tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. She nodded encouragingly. Aline took Enrique's hand and shook it. "But I have conditions," she said, her voice now firm. Enrique smiled. "Go ahead. First, the app has to be completely free. No ads, no paywall, nothing that prevents someone without money from using it." She took a deep breath. "Second, we need to hire people who truly understand the problem. Public school teachers, working people, folks who know what it's like to not have time." She looked around. "And third, I want my mum to be part of the team, because she's who I'm trying to help, and if she doesn't approve, then we've failed." Applause broke out. It wasn't polite, ceremonial applause. It was genuine. Some journalists started clapping, standing up. Then more people did. And then the entire auditorium was applauding. Not the rehearsed presentation, but the raw courage of a girl who refused to be turned into a trophy. Over the next 3 months, the project was rebuilt from the ground up. Aline led meetings, reviewed code, tested interfaces. Joanna participated in focus groups, providing feedback on what worked and what didn't. The Institute hired community educators, linguists specializing in accessibility, designers focused on low connectivity usability, and finally, on a September morning, Words That Fit was launched. Not in an auditorium full of important people, but in a public park with free Wi-Fi where Aline showed the app to cleaning ladies, delivery drivers, street vendors, the people who were always the real target. An elderly woman named Teresa, a retired cleaner, was the first to download it. She opened the app and read the introductory text. Simple, clear, respectful, her eyes filled with tears. "I always wanted to understand these things," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "But I thought I was too dumb, that it wasn't for me." Aline held her hand. "It was always for you." 6 months after its launch, Words That Fit surpassed 2 million downloads, but the numbers didn't tell the whole story. They didn't tell about Marcos, an app delivery driver, who finally understood his work contract and discovered he had rights they never explained to him. They didn't tell about Juliana, a domestic worker in Salvador who used the app to study for the NM and got into federal pedagogy. They didn't tell about the thousands of small, invisible victories, people who stopped feeling ashamed, who stopped thinking knowledge wasn't for them. Aline continued her studies. Not at an elite school, she transferred back to the neighborhood public school, where she felt less alone. Henrique supported her decision and kept the scholarship as an investment in the project. Joanna continued working, but now she was also an official consultant for the app, ensuring every update passed her review as someone who truly needed it. One day, Enrique invited Aline to lunch. They went to a casual diner, not the fancy places where he used to close deals. They sat near the window. He ordered the daily special. She ordered the same. "You know," Henry said as they waited for their food, "that night at the gala when I saw you in the middle of the ballroom, I almost let the security guards escort you out. I almost let you be just another invisible girl, kicked out of a place she didn't belong." Aline looked at him, saying nothing. "But something made me stop. I don't know if it was the way you were holding that notebook, or the way your mom looked at you, even from afar. But I realized," he paused, searching for the right words, "I realized we spend our whole lives surrounded by important people, and we forget that the most important people are the ones we pretend not to see." He smiled, a little awkwardly. "So thank you for teaching me to see again." Aline smiled back. "Thank you for listening." The food arrived. They ate in comfortable silence. And when they finished, Henry paid the bill, left a generous tip, and before leaving greeted each restaurant employee by name. Aline realized he had learned something more than just seeing. He had learned to recognize. Months later, the official website for the Alvarenga Institute was updated. On the homepage, alongside awards and certifications, there was a photo. It was from the gala, but it wasn't about the jewelry, or the dresses, or the forced smiles. It was of Aline standing in the center of the ballroom, holding the duct-taped notebook, looking at the camera with scared but determined eyes. And below the photo, a simple caption chosen by Aline. "That night, the one who told me to leave taught me the value of staying. Sometimes transformation begins with a step out of place. Sometimes you need to cross the invisible line that separates worlds to remember that we are all human." Aline didn't change the world alone, but she refused to be erased. And in that refusal, she made space for thousands of others to also refuse. Because dignity isn't given, dignity is recognized. And you, what did you think of this story? Have you lived or witnessed a moment when an invisible person changed everything? Leave it in the comments below. I really want to know what you think. And if this story touched you, subscribe to the channel. Every day there's a new story that will make you see the world differently. See you next time.